All right, let's start with the question number 1 on JavaScript Top 100 interview question answer series. What are closures in JavaScript? A closure is a function that retains access to its lexical scope even when the function is executed outside that scope. It may sound little tricky, but the way you should look at it is you are defining a function, and then inside the return you are returning a function basically, right? So whenever your function is called, right, and you can directly call it outside through its lexical scope. Okay, that's the most important part about closures. So remember, a closure is a function that retains access to its lexical scope even though function is executed outside that scope. Now whenever you create an instance of this function increment and then call it, this will print the value of +1 because it's getting returned, right? So that is what is called a closure. One of the very one of the most important things that they ask. Now the next is, what is the difference between null and undefined? So null represents an intentional absence of any object value. Okay, that means there is no value. Undefined represents an uninitialized variable or a variable that has been declared but it doesn't have a value. Okay, so in this case, if you say let a and print console log a, it will give you undefined. Whereas b is a value, null is also a value. Okay, that means it's an intentionally left empty value. Okay, remember that. If you try to print some variable which is not defined, you'll get undefined. If you print a value, if you print a variable which does not have any value, it will still give you undefined. Whereas null is a value. So remember that. What are var, let, and const in JavaScript? Var, these are the different levels of scope that you have in terms of how the variable can be accessed, can be modified. Okay, when you use var keyword, that means it's a function scoped wherever it is declared, or globally if you are just writing a script. Var variables can be reassigned. Okay, remember that. Let is a block scoped, which means it will work wherever it is defined in that scope. Again, it can be reassigned. Const is a block scope, but it cannot be reassigned. That means you cannot change the value of const. You can change the value of let, but you cannot redefine it. Var can be redefined and reassigned. Remember that well. Very important. Const x equal to 10 can be reassigned, can be redeclared. If you write var x equal to 20, it will still work. But you cannot write let y equal to again something. It will give you error. But you can give y equal to 30, that you can reassign. Const, you cannot reassign, you cannot redeclare. That's the difference between var, let, and const. What is the this keyword in JavaScript? Very important thing. The this keyword refers to the context in which a function is called. It will be scoped inside whichever function it is called. It can refer to the global object, the object that owns the method, or an explicitly bound object using call, apply, or bind. Now in this case, if you see this, when you write, it's only inside this function, okay, not outside. So this can be used in different references, different way. But remember, it's a scope basically, which is in the context of that particular function or that particular class. Explain the concept of promises in JavaScript. A promise is an object representing the eventual completion or failure of an asynchronous operation. Remember, whenever we talk about promises, it is talking about asynchronous code execution. Okay. Now, whenever we talk about asynchronous code, it has two states. Either it will be resolved or it will be rejected. So now there are three things that you have to understand. One is pending, fulfilled, and rejected. So whenever you resolve a promise, you will resolve it with a resolve or a reject. Okay. So, and then you will write promise dot then. You can catch the error or display the message, whatever comes. But remember, promises are used with asynchronous code in order to wait for certain thing to solve. Now it can be two states. It can either resolve or it can be rejected. When you make a successful API call, you get the data, you resolve it. If you don't get the data, you can reject it and say operation failed or API failed, etc. What is the event loop in JavaScript? The event loop is a mechanism in JavaScript that handles asynchronous operations. It checks the call stack and processes messages from the message queue. Now take a look here. When you do this console.log, it will first come, execute first, then execute third, and then go with execute second. Okay, because either you are doing a set timeout. Okay, that means it handles asynchronous operations. It will check the sequence and then execute that in the sequence. That thing is called event loop in JavaScript. What is the difference between synchronous and asynchronous code? Synchronous means it executes sequentially, like step by step. blocking the program until each task is completed. Whereas asynchronous code means it will execute independently of the program, which means it will not wait for other tasks. It will continue executing, will come back to it once that task is finished. Okay, again take a look at here. Synchronous means console.log start end. It will first print start, then print end. In asynchronous, it will print start, then it will print end, and once this time is delayed, then it will print the message delayed. That means it is not waiting for this. While it is executing independently, it will execute only when this thing is resolved. Okay, that's the most important thing. What are JavaScript data types? JavaScript has both primitive and reference data types. Primitive includes, just like any other programming language, string, number, boolean, null, undefined, big int. These are all the different primitive data types. Now what about the reference ones? Reference ones includes object, array, function. These are the different reference data types, but they are not primitive. So remember, if they ask you what are primitive, you have to say that it is string, number, boolean, null, undefined. But if they talk about reference data types, it will be object, array, function, and others. What is a JavaScript callback function? A callback function is a function that is passed on to another function as an argument to be executed later. Now remember, whenever we are doing a callback, that means here you're calling greeting, correct? The function, we have created a function called greeting and console.log hello. And inside this, we are having one more function which is called callback. Now when I call this greeting, and this is the function that will be executed. So I'm passing another function as an argument. That's the way you will explain it. You have to say that a callback function is a function that is passed to another function as an argument to be executed later. What is the difference between double equal to and triple equal to? Double equal to means compares the values, performing type coercion, means that it will not check for the type. If you put 1 equal to 1 in double quotes, like here, if you put 2 equal to double quotes 2, it is still true, though this is number, this is string. But if you put triple equal to, it will check for the data type as well. That's why here it will fail, because this is a number, this is a string. Very, very important, especially when you're writing code as well. Remember, double equal to will only check for the value, will only compare the value. Triple equal to will compare the value along with the data type. What is hoisting in JavaScript? Hoisting in JavaScript's default behavior of moving all declarations to the top of the current scope before code execution. Now, always remember, this is something that you will find in a lot of legacy code if you're working, that some of the variables are defined below and then they're called at the top, right? If they're in a function or something, that's a different thing, but you cannot access a variable before it's defined. That is called hoisting in JavaScript. What is the difference between apply, call, and bind in JavaScript? Call calls a function basically with a specified this value, and arguments are passed individually. Apply is a function with specified this value and arguments are passed as an array. Remember, that's the difference between call and apply. Both will call a function, but in call you will pass the arguments individually. In apply you pass them as an array. Bind always returns a new function with specified value and initial arguments. Take an example here. You have the function greet, which is just printing a hello and this name. Now when you are calling this greet.call, and you're passing an object with value which is Alice. Now here it would just take an individual argument, that is call. Apply will always take it as an array, whereas bind will be binding it and returning a new function which you can call and execute it with the initial values, whatever values were passed. Okay, I hope it's clear. Very, very important, so make sure you go through these again. What are arrow functions in JavaScript? Arrow functions are a shorter syntax for writing functions. They do not have their own this value and inherit this from the surrounding context, which means here this is a shorter way of writing function, function name, function brackets, then curly brace open, curly brace closed, etc. If you have just one line of logic, you can just write the arrow functions. They are just shortcut to write, but again you cannot write this dot and all that since they don't have the scope binded. Okay, so the question can also be, where do you use arrow functions? You can use arrow functions wherever you have only 1 or 2 lines of code which you want to quickly update. Okay, immediately you want to change. What is the spread operator in JavaScript? The spread operator is used to expand elements in an iterable. That means it's like an array or an object. Now you can use that to spread, you can use it to club, and you can use it to merge and do much more things with the spread operator. Okay, you can use it as a function passing of when you don't know how many arguments you want to pass. So the usage are different. That's when it is called rest operator. But in this case, we are talking about spread operator. So which is nothing but it will expand the elements in an array or an object. So here you have an array. You're saying dot 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 array comma 4 comma 5. That means you're expanding this array here. So it is 1 2 3 4 5 now. What is the rest parameter in JavaScript? Like I was talking about, the syntax may look same just like spread operator, but it is used in a different context. The rest parameter is used to collect all the remaining arguments passed to a function into an array. When you don't know how many arguments you want to pass, it can be 1, it can be 2, it can be 3, it can be 100, anything. That's where you'll use dot 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 numbers. That means you don't know how many arguments. It can be 1, it can be 2, it can be 100. That's where you'll use the rest parameter. So you'll then do rest dot whatever operation you want to do, either a loop it or take that value and process it. What are template literals in JavaScript? Template literals allows for string interpolation and multi-line strings using backticks. Now this is a much better way of writing the messages instead of doing concatenation of strings, then comma separate, then adding value and all that. We'll use template literals. We use it with backtick. Type the string, then put $sign, then curly brace open, curly brace closed. Inside this, you can directly type the name of the variable with the value. It will come. What is destructuring in JavaScript? Destructuring allows us to unpack values from arrays or properties from objects into distinct variables. That means if you have an object like this person named Alice, age 25. Now you can just do a destructuring like this and say extract name comma age from person. This is called destructuring in JavaScript. You basically unpack the values from either array or objects into distinctive variables.